Okay, so Imam Tawakkul is online with me from London, Ontario. I'm going to do the soft part of it, and he will go hard on it. Why we chose this topic for this conference is that I'm seeing a rise and increase in issues that if our youth were knowledgeable about what marriage is all about, if they were knowledgeable about the rights and responsibilities, and the influences that, the social influences that they have. Our divorce rate among Muslims in Canada is more than the average of the community at large. It's very, very unsettling for us because and it's not because either is bad or good. It's more about not just knowing what marriage is all about, because we as parents don't talk about it. We don't educate our youth in this. So, inshallah, I have just chosen two verses from the Quran to elaborate on what peace and tranquility as it's directed from the Quran. And among Allah's signs is that Allah created you mates from among yourselves that you may dwell in peace and tranquility with them, and Allah has put love and mercy between your hearts. Verily in this, that are signs for those who reflect. So are we going to reflect on this? Let's do it. And then Allah says, O humans, never revere your guardian Lord who created you from a single soul, created like nature its mate, and from this scattered countless men and women. Reverence Allah through whom you claim your mutual rights. Arabic is a very, very rich language. For us to translate it, we can't translate it. We can give the translation of the meaning of the Quran. Every word will give you so much insight that it's impossible to reflect in one slide. But the word first, of course, is read, but you have to read and reflect. These verses lay out the framework for a happy marriage. The verses lay out the terms of reference by which you can do that, objectives and good goal of marriage in Islam, and the ultimate wisdom of Allah. So we are going to analyze this with the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this equality of creation of human beings. Pay attention to that. We created you from a single soul. What does that mean? Right? If the origin is one and the same, can one be more than the other or less than the other? So when you're entering a marital relationship or you're thinking about marriage, know that you're entering that as two equals. Okay? And that's and when you reflect on it, you go on to the very verses, where different aspects of it you will reflect. I want you to ponder as well, close to reflection. The fact that we come from the same soul signifies our equality as humans. When the essence of a creation is the same, the argument of who is better or greater is redundant. Right? In some Muslim cultures, we place the man on a pedestal and women to serve them. This is a direct command that says no. For Allah to stress on this fact and then to talk about marriage in the same verse is of great significance to those of us who are in the field of marriage counseling. Because most of the time, for the 40 years that I've been doing marriage counseling, in spiritual counseling for couples, this is something that always comes up. The man, she should do this. Oh, this is her job. Oh, this is what she's required. Or her, the same thing, because there is no equilibrium, there is no understanding, and there is no balance. We know that imbalance of stature and the equality of genders will cause an imbalance, right? And in marital relationship as well. And it leads to a dysfunctional relationship. So what are the consequences? When one spouse thinks themselves superior because of their gender, social status, or religiosity, these are two new things that have come up when I'm in Canada among Muslim communities. The social status makes a difference. And I remember the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said, gave advice that marry your daughters in equal status, right? And I used to, as a young person, I didn't understand that, because for us everyone is equal. But if you are coming from a well-to-do, rich family and you marry your daughter into a person who is not, is there going to be some adjustment time? Is there going to be some conflict? So he was telling us to look deeper than what is out there, right? The values, are they the same? So you go and you look at the family, you know the family culture, because that is the way you understand if this is a good match. And of course, after everything you do, it's Allah's will. There will be situations where we have to separate. Better than live in a bad marriage. So this leads misuse or abuse because oppression of the less vulnerable partner is seen as a right. You're sending one as privileged, one as that you have the rights over them, and not recognizing your own rights. Many marital difficulties are result from this attitude. Many a times it is just like a matter of putting it in front of them, this is what you are doing, and there is no major cause. Give you one example. I got a call from a young man. I said, Auntie, my wife wants a divorce. I said, what? You just got married a few months ago. What the heck is up here? And he goes, well, her sister got engaged and she put up on the social media the diamond ring that she got, which was bigger than the diamond ring she got. And you don't love me. So I want a divorce because look at my sister, she got this diamond ring. And I'm going, how immature can you be, right? But now with all this, private life is out in the open. People are showing their weddings that are thousands of dollars and bragging about it. Does it not create an environment where people are feeling cheated, right? They're feeling less. We are told that to keep our intimacy of a marriage, our relationship, what we are doing for each other as private. But now it is exposed all over the place, right? So there is bound to be. I've got couples coming for counseling and I said, okay, sit down, talk about it. We don't talk. I said, what do you mean? We text.
Yes, on WhatsApp.
Huh? Exactly. And you're going, okay, that's not communication, right? So those are the kind of things that are coming up. We have to understand this verse also. Establishing the humanity and equality of both men and women, Allah in His infinite wisdom has laid the ground rule for establishing peace in domestic life. Okay? Remember this. It's not about who is greater or who is better, because it's a mutual responsibility. From these two verses, this is what we have derived. Furthermore, the primary responsibility assigned to the husband and wife as a couple and parents is a functional model for smooth running of the household. Your husband's priority is to provide, right? Go out, and the wife is, but it's not a definitive law or a judgment on the competence of either gender. Doesn't mean a woman cannot go out and work. Most of the wives of the Prophet were working women. Khadija radiallahu was a good example, right? So how have we put these things as Islamic? Oh, a woman can't be older than the man, right? Most Muslim cultures. And I asked one time, I don't know which culture it was, and I said, why do we insist on that? And she said, well, he can provide, he's settled, so it doesn't matter. give my 15, 16-year-old in marriage to a man who is beyond 40 or 50. So these are the attitudes that remain. Roles can vary at various stages of marital life and are flexible, right? So I had one couple that I was counseling. The man had lost his job and the wife was working. But she called me and she said, Auntie, I can't do this. I'm very stressed out because after work I come home, I have to look after him. And he is sitting there, I have to clean the house, I have to get the kids, I have to make the meals. And he says, that's my duty. And I said, so I talked to him and I said, okay, young man, so that's his duty. And so what's yours? I said, you should be grateful that you lost a job and she is there to help, right? To be the other. So you have to work and you're not, can't do it. You can. You cook and you clean and you help with the kids. Because this is oppression of the girl, right? Another hadith that says men and women are twin halves of each other. MashaAllah. Why did the Prophet say twin halves and not just halves? Ponder and reflect on it. Go and look at the Arabic text of it. Why? Because we never ask why. We are just told and we listen. We don't reflect. We don't question. And the Quran is all about question, ask, reflect. And we don't. And in the most important institution of our lives, our marriage. And these are guidance for that. Because twins are reflection. They look the same, right? You can't say one is bigger or one is better. They're twins, right? And we are twin halves because without the half, you're incomplete. Subhanallah, what hikmah and what beautiful way of explaining that we are one, right? And then we are whole, not the other way around. Furthermore, by using the analogy of twin halves, the Prophet has underlined the reciprocal nature of men and women. Reciprocate in society as well in marriage, because about men and women in general, Allah says they are what? Awliya, helping friends of each other in general society, right? And in marriage, what are they? Reciprocal relationship, right? So the objective and goal of marriage in Islam, according to above Quranic verses, is to gain Allah's pleasure and to establish peace and tranquility in families and society. That's it. It seems simple, it is not. It's a lifelong struggle. There will be good days and there will be bad days. Peace is one of the objectives. It is important for us to reflect on these signs and the significance in the Islamic frame of reference. Your frame of reference has to be based on the Quran and Sunnah and not on the environment that you are in. Because you can't reflect on it in the environment that we are today or the values that we see out there. But when it comes to a conflict, you go back to the Quran says this without understanding it. That's the conflict that our young generation is having. For those of us who were married and then came here as immigrant, brought that frame of reference. But we have not very well passed it to our youth. And not passing it at all. This is not a topic of interest about how to make a marriage. It's all about get married. Okay, this is half of your faith. Come on, every influencer I see, and I really hate to see them because they make me mad, these Muslim influencers, that's all they are telling our youth, that the woman has to stay home and the man has to work, and come on. You guys have shrunk the most rich literature and information on this most beautiful institution in marriage to do and don'ts. according to your own biases. There's a lot of bias in the Muslim community about marriage and the role of men and women. These prerequisites to peace are justice. You want peace? This is when I talk to mainstream and I tell them, you want to know what peace is in Islam? So one of the reporters was talking to me and says, Shahina, I always hear Islam is salam, peace. But there is so much conflict in the Muslim world. There is so much going on, war, violence, whatever. And I reflected on it. Because to me, here, peace and coming from the generation, peace, brother, peace. No, sorry, it's not a mantra. There is a formula, there is in the Quran that tells us what peace is and how to establish it. And it's beautiful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, it guides us in the Quran, that as long as you have persecution and oppression, you cannot have justice. And if you do not have justice, you cannot have peace. Now turn that formula around, right? In order to have peace, whether it's at home, whether it's in the world, whether it's in our community, there has to be justice. And in order to have justice is what? Right? That's how you achieve peace. We don't take that formula to our family. That's what we need to do. Because family is the root, is the of society, not an individual. In Islamic frame of reference, it is the family. And marriage is what gives water to the family. Therefore, any type of injustice, whether it is oppression or persecution, cannot be tolerated if there is to be peace in Muslim families and societies in general. So please, all the brothers who are going around saying you can beat up your wife, excuse me, show me in the Quran where it says that. When I'm doing domestic violence counseling, this is what I hear all the time, and I say, show me. Show me where does it say that. The English translations have used the word beat. The English translations have used, and they claim to be translations, but it's not. The Arabic also has a different meaning, and when you are trying to look at the Quran and you're deriving meanings from it, you also have to see if the seerah, the sunnah, the hadith is supporting it. I've written a whole article on this, and it was published, and I said, Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he had conflict with his wives, you remember that? And what was the command? Allah said, walk away. He walked away. For 40 days he was, and then he came back, and Allah's command was, ask your wives if they want to be separated, divorced. They are welcome. But those who want to stay. He didn't beat them. He didn't even touch them. He didn't even raise his voice. He walked away. Why don't we look at that meaning of the Arabic? Because, as I said, language is very diverse and very rich Arabic. But you need to know where it applies, what you are doing. The classical scholar said, oh, a stick. And do you know where that comes from? From the Bible. The rule of thumb. So that's the softest way they could do it, but they resisted. They resisted even that for the longest time, if you go back in history, when this question was being asked. So it's very, very painful for those of us who do domestic violence conflict, and Quran is thrown at our face by the perpetrator, and even by the victim, because they don't understand as well. I was on CBC one time, and they were talking about, you know, Shahina, we are seeing some domestic violence cases, and I know it's allowed in Islam. But I said, excuse me? Who told you so? Right? And I had to challenge that whole narrative. So the narrative has to be fixed. Oppression and the tranquility. The verse says, you know, Allah has tranquility. Tranquility, on the other hand, is a state of being which is achieved when peace has been established. People say, oh, you know, you do your nikah and now you have love and tranquility, and it's not that easy. Okay? Nikah is a contract. The contract has to be what? Honored? But you're not honoring it. But hey, we did nikah, now where is the love? Where's the... Come on, people, right? However, peace and tranquility is compromised when anger and injustice between family members are left unresolved. We tell our daughters, we tell our sons, don't go for counseling. Oh, okay, don't tell anyone, just get it resolved among yourselves. Why not? Why not go for medicine when you are sick? Will you not go to a doctor if you have misplaced your arm? You will go. But why do we look at marriage as, No. Tranquility does not mean perpetual state of bliss, please. You have to work on it. Being Muslims does not make us immune to tragedies and catastrophes. In fact, Allah tells us in the Quran that we will face trials in this life. And marriage is that. Mercy and consultation is one again. And if you guys want this, you can have it, but I don't want to take away time from Abdul Fattah to start his. Also, Allah provides us with the tools by which we can achieve the desired state of peace. So Allah has not left us, how to swim, has not thrown us into this ocean of marriage and relationship, but has also given us. The two principles the Muslim family must be based on is rahmah, mercy, and shura, consultation. As long as you have these two operating function of your family, you will not be left. And among Allah's signs is that Allah created you made from among yourselves that you may dwell in peace and tranquility with them, and Allah has put love and mercy between your hearts. Just keep reading and reflecting on this. So now, yes, Allah has placed potential of mercy between spouses, but we have to work on it. We have to develop ourselves to that point where we can show mercy. So marriage in Islam is a partnership. It's based on equity, equality, clarity of roles, equitable status, and responsibility. Your rights cannot be in isolation. They have to be along your responsibilities. Lack of mercy in a marriage or a family renders it in Islamic terms dysfunctional. Why is the dysfunctional world today? There's no mercy. There's no mercy. Mercy is evaporating from our consciousness. Marriage in Islam, in addition to mercy, Quran further states that Allah has blessed spouses to feel love for each other. It should, however, be noted that the Islamic concept of love is different from the more commonly understood concept of romantic love, and I will go into that quickly. First, faith. Love between Muslim spouses is for the sake of Allah. Because if you were to love each other for the sake of each other, hey, you've got trouble. Because there will be constant friction. So when I'm upset with my husband, I remind myself, Allah is merciful. Right? To gain the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's our faith. So it is from Allah that we claim our mutual rights, and it is for Allah that we are accountable to how we treat each other. The counselor is not going to, I'm not going to judge people. I don't have the right to judge. Your parents, your grandparents, your in-laws, they don't. You have to answer to Allah. Because you entered that marriage in the name of Allah. Allah was the witness to your nikah. Love. One difference is that love between men and women in Islamic context can only be actualized physically and expressed sexually in a legal marriage. I'm not seeing legal marriages these days. I'm seeing going to any Tom, Dick, and Harry and do a nikah. They're not registered. And when it means they are not registered, he can walk away, right? Or if he has been living with, or her is living with, after 5 years or 3 years in Manitoba, you become common law, right? So then they can say, okay, we are common law. Usually it is the girl who suffers. Because I have so many cases over the years where, oh sister, we did nikah and I'm divorcing her, and 3 times and that's done. That's what these movies and dramas, especially from South Asia and others, are showing. Like, you can give 3 times and that's it. That's final. Where the heck does it say that? We are not educating our girls and our boys in the fiqh of the 3 divorce. We are taking the easy way out. And who is taking it? The guys are doing it. We are seeing temporary marriages on our campuses. And the girl is innocent. She's probably younger than the guy, and we can do this. Is halal dating. In Sunni fiqh, it's haram. It's not accepted. Even in Shias, I have talked to them, and they have said only a minor minority, but that is also with a contract. They are not doing any contract. I had one case where the girl got pregnant through this temporary marriage, and the guy is nowhere to be found. How does she explain when there was no witnesses, when there was no paperwork? This is what we are seeing in Canada, people. And I'm really, really very concerned for our girls and our boys, because they are being influenced. It is therefore necessary to give the relationship protection of both the law and the law of the land and Islamic law, in sincere intention and awareness of our duties and responsibilities, honored in sincere submission to Allah. So this is love in Islam. Love sustains. Love does not consume, but sustains. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sustains the creation. That's our example. Allah expresses His love for the creation by providing sustenance. We have water, we have air, we have food, we have... Love in Islam is to sustain our loved ones physically, emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually to the best of our ability. We're not asking you to be superhuman. You will get angry, you will get upset, you will have a conflict. The prime responsibility for husband is to provide for the family. The wife is, she can contribute. Whatever the wife earns is hers. When I tell that to marriage counselors in the mainstream, they're just like, what? I said, yes. What the woman inherits or what she earns is her money. If she chooses to provide without any compulsion for the family, and who wouldn't if it's a good marriage, she gives a loan or a charity. Imagine that. Love accepts. Love is to accept. It is selfishness to try and mold someone into what you want them to be. Okay, understand, girls and boys, what love is. Okay, it's not going out on a date. It's not going out to beauty. It is about that it accepts. Love is magnanimous. It has no limits of how you can secure. And love is secure to accommodate and appreciate personality differences. No 2 people are alike. Right? So if your husband is not exactly as you dreamed him, well, guess what? You're stuck with the one. But and the same is, you just make the best of it. Love challenges us to achieve our potential. That's love. That's how you recognize it. Love encourages us to tap into our talents. Love takes pride in our achievements. Love facilitates our growth. Love that springs from our intention to gain Allah's mercy is the most delightful experience in life. Remember that. That's why marriage is considered so sacred. Love is never too proud to seek forgiveness, nor too stingy to forgive. Cornerstone of marriage: forgive and accept the forgiveness. That's love. Love is willing to let go of hurts and letdowns. We don't keep repeating. I have women come into my office for marriage counseling, and okay, so sister, in 1969 he said that to my mother. Excuse me? I don't remember what happened yesterday, and you're telling me she's still holding it. Grudge. And the husband, I never did, maybe has a bad memory, but that's not the issue you're in my office for, right? Love allows us the strength to forgive. It compels you. Your partner is asking you, forgive me, I'm sorry. It allows you the strength to forgive, because some of us are not able to do that, and a relationship will not function if you are not. Love guards relationships. It guards you. It guards your security. Love is mercy. Mercy compels us to love, and love compels us to have mercy. You can't have one without the other. In the Islamic context, the two are synonymous. Okay? Allah is Ar-Rahman, the attribute Allah mentions 170 times in the Quran that He chooses for Himself. And I hate English language when I'm talking about Allah as Him and He. Allah is neither male nor female. But that is, and in my language, Urdu, we do have a word for Allah which is gender neutral. We don't have it in English. That's one of the. Mercy is practical application, means to have the show compassion. 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. I'll try and do it in 2. Love respects. Because there are so many young girls and boys who come to my office and talk about love like they have seen in the movies or read in the novels, and I'm sitting there giving them, this is love in Islam. Quran is rich with it. And it starts first with the love of Allah and the love of the Prophet, and it comes down to all the other. Respect does not allow us to take our loved ones for granted or to ignore their opinion, feeling, and input. You may disagree, but respect. You don't have respect, you don't have love. Love fosters, and love is trust. Good Lord, how many cases that are rising up now, which I'd never seen growing up, or even when I left my country of birth at 19, married to a complete stranger, didn't know his name. My parents arranged it. I saw him first time. Both of us saw each other at our wedding night. My husband was in New York. We trusted our parents. They were friends and they were family, right? And that they knew that we were a good match. But we knew we needed to work on it. And we've now been married 51 years, okay? Is because you need to trust. We trusted our parents. I can't imagine any of you, my grandkids included, my son included, that you would be asked to marry someone that you hadn't. And I don't. And I told my parents, my sister brought a photo to me, and I said, I just threw it away. And I said, you guys have printed the cards for the wedding, and you're showing me the photo now. What if I say no? And she was just, what? You want me to tell Dad that? Yes, go ahead. Because what they did was not Islamic, right? We have that. Love is caring. Alhamdulillah, it worked out great. Love is caring. We don't show care for each other, people. Oh, we've been married so long. Oh, it's 5 years. Oh, no, care. Care means taking, nurturing. And love is kind. Where is the kindness? Okay? Love grows. Every day of your married life, the love grows if it is based on the principles and the forgiveness and all that I have talked about. Love enhances, love protects, love is selflessness, and love is truthful. Okay, that is concept of love in Islam. Okay, thank you.
Jazakallah khairan, Auntie Shahina, for the beautiful and wise words when it comes to understanding the marital relationship. Just before I begin, I need to know how much time I have, because I can adjust this where, I can go for hours or I can go for 20 minutes, however long you need me to.
20 minutes.
Just tell Shaheen.
20 minutes.
20 minutes? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Jazakallah khairan. This is going to be a bit of a challenge, simply because when we're talking about marriage, there's honestly so much that could be said about it. But we'll get through as much as I can, inshallah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. To start with, when we're talking about aspects related to marriage, as an imam that performs marriages, I hear so many different situations and scenarios that people bring forth when it comes to trying to navigate challenges within the marital relationship. And people will always be asking in terms of what's the ruling. So, for example, Auntie Shahina was mentioning the issue with either temporary marriages or with threefold divorces and whatnot. And so it's one thing to look at the ruling, but it's another to be able to understand its context and how it's applied. And this is something that is often people lose sight of in terms of, we need to look at things on a case by case scenario or basis. We can talk about the ruling, but without applying the ruling in a specific or particular context can actually lead people to misunderstanding, can actually lead people to doing things that when we're looking at the overall bigger picture, it's actually causing more harm than good. And this is something that it's imperative that we have sort of a sound understanding, not just of the ruling, but okay, how does this actually apply in our particular situation? I appreciated Auntie Shahina in terms of when she was describing love within the Islamic faith tradition. And this is something that it's important to reaffirm and to be able to understand the Islamic definition of true love. It is not based on an emotion, and it's not to deny the emotion exists. Everyone knows, like when we're talking about the emotion of love, this is something that a person does not have any capacity to control in terms of whether those feelings come or not. Right. And so when we're talking about love for the sake of Allah, it's not based on an emotion that I have absolutely no control over, whether it comes. And when I'm talking about the emotion, I'm talking about, the gushy mushy feelings, the butterflies in your stomach. You see the person that you're in love with, and then your heart starts to race and you start sweating and you get nervous and all these types of things. I'm not denying that that exists. Of course that exists. It's real. But Islamically speaking, that cannot be the definition of how we understand love in the context of marriage. It exists, it's there. But at the end of the day, true love is something that can only happen after marriage, never before. And it's because of the sanctity and the sacredness of the relationship between a man and a woman that it's only within the confines of marriage, as Auntie Shahina mentioned, that a person is able to then show the manifestations of that love based on their actions, based on their statements. And that is not possible before marriage simply because there's not a contract between the man and the woman that makes what is impermissible permissible. And this is really at the core of the issue when we have a lot of different problems that happen within marriage and things like that. The matter needs to be looked at in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of being able to understand things in their greater context. So that's something that I felt was necessary because in the Quran, when it talks about mawadda, in the verse, the one verse that was quoted, that amongst the signs of Allah, among his signs is that he has created for yourselves spouses amongst yourselves so that you may live with them in tranquility, and has placed mawadda and rahmah between you. Mawadda in the Arabic language, Allah doesn't use mahabba in this verse. He uses mawadda, which refers to the purest form of love. It's the essence of love. It's what's the core of love. And that is based on a person's actions. It is based on a person's conscious choices and what they choose to say and what they choose to do, such that this is truly, it's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it's not for the sake of the nafs, it's not for the sake of the ego, and it's not for the sake of an emotional impulse that a person does not really have any control over. So it's important that we have that definition first and foremost clearly understood in this regard. Now, when we're talking about specific situations, and the ones that come to my mind, the most common ones, are there are four different things that I'll try to unpack a little bit. I'm not going to be able to go into detail or depth about them, but just to kind of give sort of a bird's eye view and a general view of it, in terms of how we're supposed to understand these things, with the comments that I just mentioned in mind. The context, the bigger picture, is looking at the spirit of the law. It's looking at our connection to Allah, that we will be going back to Him on the day of judgment. We will be held accountable and responsible for our actions, for our statements. This is what I refer to when I'm talking about the bigger picture and the bigger context. Because how we apply the rulings, I always must connect things with my akhirah. I always must connect things with my relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The four things that come to my mind, which happen to be the most common issues or problems when it's related to issues of marriage and divorce. The first one was already mentioned in terms of the threefold divorce, and how do we navigate and understand the threefold divorce, and then marriage after a threefold divorce. That is this something that Islamically is permitted or possible, or not? The first thing that needs to be made very, very clear: words have impact. Words have effect. This is the reason why there are so many ahadith of our Prophet ﷺ and many verses in the Quran that caution us in terms of the harvest of our tongues. What is it that we say? Allah says in the Quran, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا. Say to people only that which is best. وَقُلْ لِعِبَادِي يَقُولُوا الَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Say to my servants that to only say that which is most beautiful and most excellent. And in Surah Qaf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of the two angels that are sitting on our shoulders. إذ يتلقى المتلقيان عن اليمين وعن الشمال قعيد ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. That there are the two angels that are present on our shoulders that are writing everything that we say. Not a single word is uttered. ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. Except that there is an overseer, meaning the two angels that are writing everything that we say, everything that comes out of our mouths, everything that we type on social media, all of our comments, everything like that, we're held accountable and responsible for it. And so this idea that words don't have an effect or impact, no, they absolutely have an effect and impact. And that's actually the basis of things in our religion. It's the foundation of it. I mean, our faith is based on what? The foundation of our religion, the Quran. What is the Quran? The words of Allah. What is the Sunnah of our Prophet ﷺ? His words, right? And then his actions that emanate based on the words, because it starts from the word. That's the beginning, that's the starting point. And then understanding the word and then applying it properly. And so when we look at marriage, the rulings have to do with, and I wish I could have been with you today in person, but what held me back was I actually have a nikah that I'm performing today, later on in the day, that prevented me from being with you in person, although I would have loved to have been face to face with you all. But the marriage in Islam is based on an offer and an acceptance of that offer that is oral. It's based on words. So before you even write anything down, before you sign anything, which is important to do, but the starting point is, it's called the ijab and the qabul. It's the offer and the acceptance of the offer, and that's based on words. I hereby marry you. I have accepted your marriage, right? And it's that's what causes the divorce in the presence of two witnesses. That's what affects, the marriage. That's what affects the marriage in the first place, is the ijab and the qabul. And it's literally one word that affects the divorce. And if a person, when they say the word to their spouse, that is a clear pronouncement of divorce, that is unequivocal, right? We're not talking about situations where people, they say something that is not exactly clear, but then it goes into bit depending on what their intention is. If a person says to their wife, go back to your parents, well, what did you mean by that? Did you mean you're divorcing her, or give me space, I need some time by myself, right? Whereas if a person says a clear pronouncement of divorce, you are divorced, I have divorced you, it takes effect. Whether they intended it or not, whether they were joking, it's to show the seriousness of our word. And we live in a time where what is looked at so, glorified within our society is the ability for free speech. But what is lacking in that is the responsibility that comes with it. That people, they don't feel the weightiness and the sense of responsibility that they have with their words. And so, yes, you are free to say whatever you want, but there are consequences that come about from the speech, and there's a responsibility that comes with that. That it's not just a free for all, and people just say whatever they want to say and voice their opinions and make themselves heard, etc. Right? If you look at that first part of the free speech without the responsibility, then you're actually causing yourself and others, you're potentially causing much more harm than good. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever believes in God and the day of judgment, let him say only that which is good or remain silent. Right? And there's a hadith in the collection of Imam at-Tirmidhi, 3 words of the Prophet ﷺ, in which he said, that the silence of a person is their means of salvation. That man samata or man samita naja, that whoever is silent then is saved, right? That whoever remains silent is saved, meaning that the one who is watching what they say. So this is the bigger context in which we're talking about when it comes to the threefold divorce. And if a person says a threefold divorce, according to the vast majority of scholars, that it actually counts as 3 divorces when a person says it threefold times. And I know there is an opinion that says that it only counts as once. But when we look at, historically speaking, and they compare with the 4 schools of fiqh, that's one opinion that actually is what went against the consensus of the 4 schools of jurisprudence. And so, although it's an opinion that is used most often today, but when I said at the beginning in terms of context, when people come to me with that situation, I will ask them, okay, well, what's your scenario like? What's it, your marriage, what's it been like over the past however many years that you have been married? Because that helps to then inform, is this a functional marriage or not? And if it's very dysfunctional and there are a lot of violations of rights and there's a lot of things that are happening that are impermissible within that context, and it's not a healthy relationship, then when people ask me about it, I'll tell them that your marriage is over because it's dysfunctional, and if you're going to go in that direction, you're only going to continue perpetuating the wrong. And when another aspect or issue it comes to, we'll talk about it in a moment, is domestic violence that Auntie Shahina mentioned. This is something that our community is not immune from. And I've written a khutbah series, which perhaps is available there. It's 7 khutbahs related to domestic violence. And I did this through my work at a social service agency, the Muslim Resource Center for Social Support and Integration. When we're talking about, the impacts that this has on people in terms of not just their rights, but also in terms of their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in terms of their faith. How many people have begun to question their faith or fall into doubts and confusion because they've had negative experiences related to their marriage or divorce, and then people are using the religion to justify those negative experiences, right? That people will use a verse of the Quran or hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to justify their actions, and it's a misjustification. It's a misinterpretation of the hadith, of the verse of the Quran, but they want to use that in order to actually commit more harm. And that's a form of abuse, in fact. It's called spiritual abuse. And that's a whole other, we could have an entire sessions, in fact, on spiritual abuse. And we did have one last year, actually, when Auntie Shahina graced us with her visit to London, Ontario, that we did have a conference, a day-long conference with the MRC, and we spoke about, spiritual abuse. So back to the issue of the threefold divorce, the weightiness of a person's statement is often, it's not felt in our times. And so when a person, says a threefold divorce and then it takes effect, we don't want to play around with the rulings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Sharia is not something that it's intended to, let's find sort of like the loopholes where we can just, take these opinions, and then that is at the end of the day not going to necessarily be for the benefit of the self, but it's actually going to potentially cause more harm and perpetuate more violations of rights than it is this a relationship based on bringing ourselves closer to Allah? Is this relationship based on that mawadda, on that pure love, on that rahmah, on that compassion, on the concern for one another, that sense of interdependence with one another? And so when people, they want to try to force something through, so to speak, to say, okay, well, we need to make this work. All of these things have to happen in terms of a person being aware and conscious before they actually say what they're going to say. And if a person is not thinking about this, if they don't understand the gravity, if they don't understand the impact of what it is that they say, and they just go and end up saying whatever they say, then there are consequences that come about from that. And that's why, with what we say, and it all starts with the word. There's a statement of one of the great companions, Salman al-Farisi, in which he said that أكثر الناس ذنوبا يوم القيامة أكثرهم كلاما في معصية الله. The people on the day of judgment who have the most sins are those who speak the most with that which is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because people, when we say things and we don't give them much consideration, it actually then it can, and it works both ways, for good and for bad. We might say something not thinking of the impact of it, and it's good, and it's so beneficial, and there's so much khair that comes out of it. A person doesn't give it much thought, but it might raise a person up degrees with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will write for him his pleasure until the day that he dies or she dies, based on that one word that they said that was pleasing to God. But the opposite applies as well. A person might say something that is displeasing to Allah, and then the consequences that come about from it, a person is unaware. They don't think about it. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ said. لا يلقي لها بالا. He said that a person will say something that's displeasing to Allah and doesn't give it much consideration, doesn't think about the effects or the impacts of it. And so that's the effect, that when we're looking at the rulings that a divorce that takes place, if it's a threefold divorce, then the woman has to go marry someone else and then consummate the marriage. And then a divorce takes place in order for her to be able to go back to the first husband. But that can't be done through like, okay, let's do that with the intention of going back to the first husband. Again, it's not, who you're trying to fool here. This is something that it has very severe and strong, implications and consequences behind it. And we always have to go back to that, a fundamental grounding question that I always say this to myself and to everyone. We have to ask ourselves this one fundamental grounding question. Who is this all about? Who does our universe revolve around? And there's only one of two answers. And there's not a third answer, and both answers are mutually exclusive. This is about Allah, or it's about the nafs, the self, one or the other. There's not a third choice here. And so if we're making it about Allah, when we talk about love for the sake of Allah, when we talk about doing things for the sake of Allah, it means that I'm striving towards that which is pleasing to Him, not necessarily pleasing to me. My faith becomes complete when what pleases Allah is what pleases me. Meaning that I'm striving first and foremost for what pleases Allah. And if myself aligns with that, then a person has complete faith, as is evidenced by our Prophet ﷺ statement. No one of you truly believes until his desire is in accordance with what I have brought. And so that issue is something that, again, you have to analyze and look at the situation in which these things take place. And where does the khair lie? The khair, meaning the good, that is not just short term, but long term, not just in this world, but in the hereafter as well. And we have to understand that one of the basis of our interactions with anyone in this world is the hadith of our Prophet ﷺ, where he said, help your brother whether he is oppressing or being oppressed. And the Sahaba, they said, we understand if they're oppressed, how do we help the one who's oppressing? And the Prophet ﷺ said, by stopping them from their oppression. Why? Is because this is something that will not go unaccounted for, whether it's in this world and more so, especially on the Day of Judgment. None of this goes unaccounted for. So if you're in a situation where a person is continuously doing acts of perpetual wrong and injustice and oppression, and they don't see it, and they don't realize it, and they don't think that they're doing anything wrong. But the reality of it is, in the sight of Allah, yes, they're doing something that is wrong. And a person is not introspective, they're not thinking about it, they're not taking themselves to account, right? All of this then adds up. It's being recorded in their accounts. And it's going to be addressed on the Day of Judgment. Not a single iota of injustice or oppression is going to go unaccounted for before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially when it's related to between his servants. If it's between a servant and Allah, then that's between him and Allah, or her and Allah. That's between, if it doesn't involve the rights of others, then Allah, he can choose to forgive, or he can choose to punish as at his will. But when it comes to the rights of others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not overlook a single iota of injustice. There has to be justice, and the grievance must be redressed. And if it's not done in this world, then it happens on the Day of Judgment, and the exchange of currency on that day is hasanat and sayyat. So with all of that context being said, we're talking about, going back into a marriage where a threefold divorce took place. We cannot circumvent the rulings of Allah, which are there for a reason. There's a divine wisdom behind these reasons, because it's not just about the ruling, it's about the functionality of the family, of a marriage, of the health and overall well-being on all the levels that were mentioned in terms of, physically, spiritually, emotionally, socially, mentally, all these different elements that comprise us as human beings and our experiences. Islam seeks towards that. And so we can't look at a ruling that is, separated or in isolation from its context and how it's actually applied. And the same thing applies for the second issue, which is temporary marriages, right? When we're talking about temporary marriages, again, that grounding question, who is this all about? Are you doing this for the sake of the self, or are you doing this for the sake of Allah? Now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes something that is permissible, then we strive towards that which is ideal. We strive towards that which is most pleasing to him. But if I wouldn't want it for myself or for my daughter, right, or for my sister, then why should I accept it for others when others do it? If it's something that I wouldn't want to happen to my daughter or to my sister, then why should I accept it for myself? Right? This is just another way of looking at it. And so when we're talking about the issue of temporary marriages, remember that the whole purpose of marriage is this sense of tranquility, is, لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا, is to have this sense of peace. And the household is a place of tranquility. That's why in the Arabic language, the sakan, which is the abode, comes from the same root as sakina. The maskan, the place of peace, the place of tranquility. Sakina, which is tranquility, the same root word of sakan and maskan, which is a place of living, an abode, a home, right? It comes from the same root. And so the marital relationship is meant to be a source of peace and tranquility. It's not to say that people won't have their issues. Yes, people will have their issues, but each person has to take themselves to account. And that if you're doing something right, keep doing it. If you're doing something wrong, change it. And if there are things that are outside of your control, then you bear it because it's outside of your control. as long as steps can't be taken to sort of stop it. And I'm not talking about, if a woman, for example, is being abused and then, someone comes to her and says, no, be patient and your reward is with Allah. No, I'll tell her, get out of that situation because, stop the abuse because it's not something from principle perspective that is acceptable Islamically, where a person allows perpetuation of abuse. And by the way, again, bigger context on the Day of Judgment, it's not going to be overlooked. Everyone is going to be held accountable, and especially the perpetrator. And so it's in their best interest, in fact, that the oppression and the abuse stops there. So when it comes to temporary marriages, what's the point of it? Is it to be able to develop this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to be able to have the successful transition from this world into the next, and that a person goes back to Allah and he's pleased with them? Most people aren't thinking like that when they're thinking about doing a temporary marriage, and they say, okay, but I want to prevent myself from falling into that which is impermissible. Well, there needs to be some level of discipline of the self. This is why we fast. This is why we pray. And there's a depth to that. And there has to be sort of these aspects. I have to take responsibility for actions within myself in terms of myself, the nafs, the ego, in terms of if it's unbridled, if it's just doing whatever you want and fulfilling your desires and what it is that you feel like doing, your shahwa, your capri, right, and your hawa, then this is problematic. And so if we're looking at the temporary marriages in that context, then this is not conducive to the spiritual development of an individual, nor is it conducive to the fulfillment of the true purpose of marriage, right? And so if there are certain situations or contexts that are exceptions, then that's one thing. And that's why I say the context always makes a difference. But it can't be looked at just from a general perspective. And by the way, if a person intends to get married with in their mind the intention to divorce, even though they don't say it out loud. If they say it out loud, the marriage is invalid. Like there's no aqd, there's no validity to the marriage in the first place. It's a aqd batil, as they say. It's a contract that is invalid. But if a person doesn't say that it's for a temporary period, but rather that it's in their intention, it's in their mind, even though the contract may be valid, the action itself is impermissible. Al-aqdu sahih wal-fi'lu haram. So that's another aspect. The third is that when it comes to marriages with non-Muslims, between Muslims and non-Muslims, again, the preservation of the faith is what is essential here, is what is core. And so there's only one exception, to the allowing of the marriage between a Muslim and a non-Muslim. And even then it's with caveats. It's something that there are conditions. Why? Because the bigger picture, is this going to be conducive to developing my relationship with my Lord so that I go back to him in a state of peace and tranquility, and he is pleased with me, and that will end up resulting in as a means towards one's salvation, in the hereafter. And so that's the third one. And the fourth one is, I already mentioned, in terms of domestic violence and the use of verses of the Quran or hadith of the Prophet ﷺ to justify it. This is extremely problematic. And, I've written and researched just on one verse of the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, which is the one that often is most brought up in this case, and it's quite controversial. There's so much to unpack there. And without having the time nor the luxury to be able to sort of unpack that, I'm not going to be able to do any justice whatsoever. But the gist of it is that there is nothing in our faith tradition that allows any form of violence in the domestic context in any which way, shape, or form whatsoever. There's no verse in the Quran, no hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that sanctions, justifies, condones, or allows any form of domestic violence, whether it's physical, emotional, verbal, sexual, financial, psychological, in any way, shape, or form. It's categorically prohibited in Islam because it goes against the very spirit and the purpose behind the marriage. So my time is up. I apologize. I was not able to do justice to a lot of the different issues that came about, but I'm not sure if there's going to be an opportunity, if there's going to be any Q&A. but I'm just hoping that the basic message that is given is that we always must make a connection with the bigger picture, the context, and our relationship with Allah and our standing before Him on the Day of Judgment, which is the ultimate standing that no one will ever escape from. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. You're right, we don't have time for questions because we have a jam-packed session and we're running a little bit late already, but I want to thank you very much for sharing with us, and also both you and Auntie and your reflections on marriage and the importance of it. And I myself have been married for 28 glorious years, and I think, hearing that there's ebbs and flows, and a marriage changes, and that you are equal parts of a half working together for that goal, I absolutely can validate that. I think that there are seasons in a relationship, and the transitions you navigate together and being equal parts of that half are what enable you to navigate that together. So thank you so much for sharing that today.